Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining tonight's Town Talk with your wonderful puppies. I'm sure you have right next to you right now. Tonight, we have several people with us. I'm April. I'm the worship leader at Hillspring Church. My dog Tex was here, but he gets hot, so he'll probably be up and down off the couch. And we just are so happy to have you with our Town Talk tonight. We've had several Town Talks, both live earlier this year, and now we're doing them online with the stay-home orders, but they have been just as great, and we're super excited to be able to continue them. We've had talks from everything from homeschooling to pensions, screen time, grief, and gardening. And tonight we are going to talk dog training because we're all home with our dogs and we're noticing maybe different things that we would like them to be able to do, like maybe Air Bud from the movie, or maybe stop digging in our backyard or things like that. And so we're here tonight with a special guest. But before we get to her, let me just go around and tell you who else is here. We have Trevor, our tech guy, and his buddy Tux. There he is, cute little guy. Yeah, they're all camera shy right now, all the dogs. We also have Brian, Pastor Brian, and Theo, famous. They've been around the church before if you've been here during the week sometimes. And we have Tammy with Ollie and Lucy there, also famous here at Hillspring. And also famous today, I mean, it's just full of celebrities, is the dog whisperer in the Tri-Cities, Ellie Cook, and her wonderful dog, Cass, who is 6 years old. If you don't know, Cass has been in a Ricola commercial. So when I tell you we have celebrities tonight, we really have celebrities. And Ellie has been doing dog training in the Tri-Cities for about 10 years. And she has been working with dogs since she was 5. She's competed at Westminster. And she, has a master's degree in English from Boise State, plus, jokingly, a minor in dog speak from the School of Hard Knocks. So she's very qualified to talk to humans and dogs, and we're so happy to have her here tonight. So thanks, Ellie, so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Cass, too. You're handsome as ever. And so tonight, as we kind of get going, if you have a question for Ellie, please feel free to put it in the chat, whether on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can regarding dogs and dog training. So I'll just kind of open it up. We've collected some questions from the staff, and we'll start with some of those. One of the staff who was going to be here tonight but couldn't, think in honor of her, we will ask a question for her. She says, why does my 2-year-old dog still pee sometimes in the house? And I think there's probably more than one person who wants to know that answer. So can you help us, Ellie?
Yeah, so that's a really common problem going in the house. Usually, I mean, obviously it depends on the dog and the circumstances. Usually it's just a timing issue and also a lack of understanding from the dog as to what they're supposed to do. So what I would do to hopefully help that problem is I would do the simplest thing, which is take the dog out more often. So what you want to do is basically help the dog be successful by giving them lots of opportunities to do that.
Okay.
So did I do that? Sorry.
No, you're good.
So you want to give them lots of opportunities to be successful. Every time they go outside, big jackpot with the treats. So don't leave them for really long periods in the house if you have a consistent issue with going potty inside, because that's just setting yourself up faster. So just be consistent, take them out a lot, and dogs are creatures of habit. Eventually they will learn, the new routine, which is the one that's preferable for you.
Gotcha.
So, my advice there.
Seems like such easy advice, some of the things, and then
Totally.
it's just us making sure we do it. It's sometimes I feel like it falls on us trying to be repetitive so they learn.
Calm down.
Totally. I always tell people I don't train dogs, I train people. And it's so true. Dogs are perfect. They do, most of the time they do what we ask, but we don't always ask them to do the right thing is the problem. So, they are just reacting to their environment. They're reacting to, things that we do and say. They're reacting to what other dogs do and are communicating to them. They don't have agendas. They're not spiteful, in spite of what a lot of people might think. They really, they're very teachable. So you can really get through to most dogs, even old dogs. So let's say you adopt an older dog from the animal shelter, you can certainly teach an old dog new tricks for sure. It's just creating those good habits for your dog and reinforcing your boundaries and reinforcing the behaviors that you want. That's the whole secret to training.
Should we have titled this people training? Yeah. Well, Trevor, I know you have a question for the dog whisperer, Ellie. What do you have for her?
Yeah, let me turn my mic on here. Okay. Yeah, so my dog, little Tux there, Boston Terrier, he'll run endlessly in the backyard, chasing his rope, his toys, and whatever. But as soon as I take him for a walk, he might do a quarter of the walk okay. But then about halfway through, he just stops walking every 20 feet and just freezes. He just stops and he won't budge. I gotta kind of push him along a little bit, and he'll keep walking, and then he'll stop. I gotta push him again. Eventually, I just pick him up, and I'm just carrying him for a walk now. So I mean, I don't think he's getting tired. It happens through all different seasons. So I don't know what to attribute that to, I guess, or how to help him.
So that's a really good question. And that's actually something that I have experienced with client dogs. And actually my own dog, I had a Boston Terrier for 13 years. And she had a mind of her own for sure. My best advice for a dog that isn't walking on leash the way that you want, and this will come back later if we have any questions about pulling, things like that. Straight lines are really hard. Getting a dog to walk on a leash, on a nice loose leash, with you at the same pace as you are in a straight line is very difficult. So what I do if my dog is either pulling or doing what your dog is doing, stopping, first I would have a treat and I would start turning circles. So it might look stupid, might look weird if you're on the sidewalk and cars are driving by wondering what you're doing. But if you can get their feet moving, then you can sort out your other issues. What happens when your dog stops and you're pulling is you're actually creating that oppositional tug of war type thing. So the dog is actually pulling against you instead of thinking about moving their feet. So if you can get them turning circles, kind of get their body loosened back up again, usually that will help sort that out.
I feel like if we walked circles right now, it wouldn't be that weird because we're all in quarantine. We're losing it anyway. It would just look like, well, okay.
Seems that par.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing, Tammy and Brian both know Ellie from way back, and they've had lots of experience with Ellie with their different pups in their house. And what do y'all want to talk about with Ellie tonight? Questions that you have?
We had a variety of classes with, I think we started out with Theo and had some regular obedience classes. Then we had agility classes, but we had an interesting, he and Oliver, our male Boston, were great friends. They'd play together. And then a couple different things happened. And one time a dog didn't attack Theo, but, started barking at him like crazy. And then very quickly after that, Oliver and Theo were both, there was some other dogs on the other side of the fence at one point, and they were barking back and forth. And then Oliver tried to attack Theo, and it did not work well for Oliver, honestly. And so we had to start private lessons with Ellie, and we worked on some rehab. And it was kind of funny because, with their two personalities, Oliver would just say, I hate rehab. And Theo would be like, yes, we get to go to rehab. It's so much fun. But my point was, I think there's two things. There's how do you introduce a dog into a pack that's already established? And, the male things, there were two adult males. They've both been fixed. But then subsequent, what do you do with behavioral issues if you have two dogs that you just absolutely love, but they start having issues and they just aren't really hot on each other. And I think that the third thing is, and you had mentioned at one point, maybe 3 dogs isn't the best number to have in a home.
Okay, so let me unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing, how to introduce a new dog into your pack. That is something that people don't usually put a whole lot of thought into, but they really should. Most people get very lucky that either the dogs that they put together are just fine, or the dogs end up working through their issues on their own, but that is not always the case. The most important thing when introducing a new dog is that you give your existing dogs the space and the care, I guess, to feel secure with the new dog coming in. So a big thing is jealousy. Like if you get a new puppy, just like with kids, you know, if you have kids and you bring home a new baby, the existing kids are jealous of the baby, and there can be some behavioral things like that. Dogs are the same. So what I like to do is, if possible, I introduce them first away from my property, so that it's not like a stranger coming in and invading their space. So I like to do a very short meeting, maybe like 3 times. So I have one person with one dog, one person with the other dog, both on leash. And this is for adult dogs meeting right now. So you'd have one person handling one person handling the other. Each person would ideally have some treats in their pocket, just ready to reward good, calm behavior. Then you would allow the dogs to approach each other, preferably from the side, sniff each other for no more than 3 seconds, and then move on. So you're kind of walking at each other, and the dogs approach from the side, and then you just kind of keep walking. I have this thing that I say in all my classes: any more than 3 seconds of sniffing and things get weird. So when you have new dogs meeting each other for the first time, they don't need to languish in each other's butts for more than 3 seconds. Then we move on and try again. So in that 3 seconds, they get all the information that they need about the other dog that they need to have, and then they should be able to coexist, at least in this context, for the next meeting. So once the dogs can meet each other that way calmly a couple times, then you might go and do the same thing in a bigger area of inside your house, or preferably like in your backyard where there's more space. Another thing that people do, a common mistake, is when they introduce 2 dogs, they do it in a really small area, so the dogs can't get away from each other. And I know Brian and Tammy with Theo and Ollie, you know, having them being in those 2 close quarters together created a lot of problems. You know, that's kind of when those fights and things tend to happen, is when they can't get away. Most dogs, not all, there are some dogs that like to start trouble, but most dogs, if given the choice between engaging in a fight with another dog and escaping, will choose to escape. But where problems happen a lot of the times is that we take that choice away from them, and so they feel defensive, and then they have to kind of get at each other because they feel defensive. So that's what I would do to introduce 2 adult dogs together, or like an older puppy that's, you know, over 6 months old, adolescent. So if you're introducing a baby puppy to an older dog, tends to be a little bit easier, but there's a little bit more responsibility on you to basically keep the puppy from annoying your existing older dog. Because puppies tend to be very annoying. You know, we love them, but they're a lot of work, and not just for us. They're also a lot of work to the other dogs that are teaching them how to be dogs. So I like to manage those interactions very carefully. What you don't want, first, is you don't want the puppy to annoy your older dog. And second, you don't want your older dog to be so annoyed that they do something, you know, mean, whatever, to your puppy. You don't want them to feel like they have no other choice than to snap or correct them, things like that. So a little bit of that is okay, because you want the puppy to learn respect and boundaries and things like that. But you don't want them to just be allowed to harass your older dog nonstop, jumping at their face until they get bit, basically. And that's a thing that I think happens a lot. I've seen in working with dogs as long as I have. So with introducing a little puppy to an older dog, just to reiterate, you want to make sure that everybody is pretty calm, in a calm state of mind. If they're dragging you towards the other dog, they're too excited to meet, so they need to calm down, chill out, focus. Maybe ask them to do a few simple behaviors like sit, lie down, basic tricks that they know. Not your baby puppy, obviously, because they don't know, but just ask for a little bit of focus and calm, and so they can show you that they are in a reasonable state of mind. Because if they are dragging you towards the other dog, when they meet, it's going to be like, wow, we're really excited.
Mm-hmm.
With baby puppies, manage those interactions so that it's a short amount of time, that they get to meet, interact, maybe play a little bit, and then you separate them so that they both have a chance to chill out. Okay, so that was the first part. Brian, remind me what the second part of your question was.
I don't know. Well, the first one was just behavioral issues, and then introducing people, and then what type of, I guess, rehab. What are some strategies if you do have issues, and what are your expectations? Like, what should we expect that just because we bring a new dog into the house that they're going to be wonderful friends? I think especially with 3, we had an older boxer, and Oliver was a puppy through that, and then he passed away. And so then when we brought Theo in, they were great friends. I mean, they played, but then there was an issue, and I think it was at the wrong developmental time. Unfortunate things happened, and we talked about that, and so just the whole dynamic changed. But should we have expected, hey, you guys this is an arranged marriage, you're supposed to be best buds from now on?
So I don't expect my dogs to be best friends with every dog that they meet or live with, but I expect them to tolerate being around other dogs. And so even if they don't like each other, I expect them to not try to constantly attack each other, things like that. They should be able to hang out together in the house or in the yard, chew bones sort of near each other, be crated next to each other, things like that. And if you're having problems where that is not possible for you, I would definitely suggest getting a professional trainer involved. I know that's kind of a cop-out to say, being a professional trainer myself, but getting somebody with experienced eyes to watch your dogs interact is invaluable. And they can oftentimes see things that you can't, and have a little bit better timing with certain things to show your dogs that it is possible for them to coexist. But so yeah, as far as expectations, no, I don't expect my dogs to all be best friends. Actually, at home right now, I have 4 border collies. My old girl, who's 13 almost, and all my other dogs don't like her. But that doesn't mean that they all gang up on her and try to kill her or anything like that. It just means that they ignore her. So I want my baseline behavior of most of my dogs as neutral. I don't need my dog to think that everybody is their best friend, but I do need them to just be able to coexist and exist in the world around people, other dogs, and things like that. And we can do a lot of that through training. With some dogs, it's easier than others. Some dogs, I think, come with that button installed already a little bit. Others, you need to work a little bit harder. But I don't think, I think it's certainly possible for most dogs to be able to be neutral.
What are some, are there any rules of thumb on how many dogs can coexist together? Like, it seemed like he's told me 3 was not a good number.
So 3 can be hard because that means you can have a 2 against 1 situation sometimes. I mean, I've had all sorts of numbers of dogs, to be honest. I've had 1 dog, I've had 6 dogs. Generally speaking, I mean, for the average person, you're not going to want 6 dogs. If you want to have more than 1 dog, I think 2 is a really good number, because they have a buddy, but there's not so many that they feel cluttered and crowded. 3 is obviously fine most of the time, like, but you can get that 2 against 1 type of dynamic, like I said, which when, especially during free play, like out in the yard, can be an issue. Like if 2 of them are playing tug with a toy and the third one wants to come in, that can get a little bit awkward, and sometimes they can get a little bit defensive. But I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule about what number of dogs is best. I think it's just what works best for your household, and also depends on what breeds of dogs you have too, to be honest. Like 3 labs is totally different than like 3 German shepherds. 3 Bostons.
Yeah.
Ellie,
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Tammy.
I was going to say, one of the, really big aha for me when we were with you initially, when Theo and Ollie were having trouble, was energy, like energy being such a critical component of your life with dogs, and so easy to get a dog riled up, oh, who's a good dog, blah, 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 but that's not always the best state of mind. And so talk a little bit about energy and how critical that is when you're dealing with your dogs.
Oh, for sure. That's a really big question. So I'm going to try and maybe break that down a little bit.
Okay.
So, energy is really everything with training, and just living and coexisting with dogs. Your dog's state of mind, just like with us, has everything to do with how they see the world and how they choose to react or not react to everything in their environment. So if you have a dog that is used to searching for that high energy, those highs, looking for those adrenaline spikes, let's say they spend a lot of time out in the yard fence fighting with the neighbors, or running around crazy, never learning how to settle, you're going to have a lot more problems than a dog that is either naturally or trained to just kind of be more chill around the house. Especially if you're working with behavior problems, if you're coming into working on an issue and your dog is just way too excited, we call it over threshold. So they've passed the point where they can think rationally and they're just reacting to stuff. If you go into a training session or something like that with a dog in that frame of mind, you're not going to be successful, and your dog is not going to learn the right thing. So it's really important, especially with behavior, but really for all training, that your dog and you be in the proper frame of mind before starting to work. And for me, what that looks like is my dog is calm and focused. If I ask them for their attention, so if I ask them for eye contact or ask them for a behavior, they do that instantly and without a lot of prompting. And for me, that means I'm not thinking about the rest of the stuff going on in my life. I'm not thinking about all the shopping list or what I have to do with my baby, or I'm thinking about working with my dog. And so what I like to do before every training session is I take like 30 seconds to a minute, or I might need a little bit more depending on what mood my dog is in. And we do what I call a warm-up routine. So what that is, I start out with my dog on leash. So even if we're going to be working off leash later, I start with them on leash, and I have a bunch of treats in my pocket. And what I do is I play the treat drop game. It sounds kind of crazy, sounds kind of dumb, but I swear it's the best thing that I have found for teaching my dog to offer focus. So all that looks like is you have a bunch of treats in your hand. I'm going to throw one about a foot or 2 away from my feet, allow the dog to go chase it. And when they come back to me and ask for another treat, I throw another one. So what the dog is getting rewarded for is turning back to me and offering attention. So we do that until my dog's response to that game is instant. So they go get the treat, they come right back to me, give me eye contact. All right, boss, we're ready to go. Once they can offer that, then I will ask for a simple behavior like a sit or a down, something that they know really well. And then if that is successful, then I'll ask for something a little bit harder. So maybe a trick that they know, or some command that's a little bit more challenging for them. If they're successful with that, then I know that they're focused and ready to train, and then we go and work on whenever we want it to work on. So just taking that little bit of time to make sure that you and your dog are in the right frame of mind is so invaluable, and it makes your training sessions so much easier, because you're not spending half the time frustrated trying to get your dog to focus. And I have had training sessions where all we did was the treat drop game. But, next time we came out and worked on it, my dog's focus was better. And over time, over time, the routine takes less and less, and they just start offering that focus sooner. And that really has a lot of benefit for all the stuff that you do.
Awesome.
So yeah, and energy is so important. Please don't take your dog for a walk around the block if they're screaming, barking, lunging at the door, dragging you out the door. I mean, you know how it's going to go. Wait until your dog can offer you calm focus. Wait until they understand how to walk on a leash before you try to take them for a walk. I can't tell you, I was sitting on the couch today watching my son, and the number of people that walked by on the sidewalk in front of my house being dragged by their dog. And it's totally frustrating. It's totally a common problem, but it's fairly easily solved with a little bit of finesse, a little bit of training things that may seem too simple, but they're really not. So just kind of understanding that your dog, just like whenever we need to focus on something important, they need to be in the right frame of mind for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wondering if I live nearby you. Did you see me today? No.
What about energy with entrance and then when you leave the house, as far as creating separation anxiety, how we respond? Do we get them all riled up when we're leaving or when we're coming? And I think same with when you go to the vet, actually, I think there's some issues around that as well.
So that's actually probably one of the most common issues that I have with the classes that I teach, or dogs that are just really excited at the door, or dogs that will bolt out the door and leave you behind. And that's usually a very human created problem, because like you said, when you're leaving or when you're coming back in, oh, hi, Fluffy. Oh, so happy to see you. Or we'll see you later. Cass is like, you're talking crazy. So what I do is I try to make leaving and coming home as neutral as possible. So if you have a dog that's really anxious while you're gone, I would always crate them, because if you can make them feel a little bit more secure in a smaller space, they're less likely to pace or be destructive or do things that make them even more upset. So I try to make it as neutral as possible, so I don't get really excited with my voice. If my dogs jump, I just turn around and I put my arms up, turn away, wait till they're calmed down, ask them to sit, and then come in. Oh, that's a really good tip too. I'm going to sidebar for a second. If you have a dog that is going crazy with jumping, if you have a dog that has gotten loose and is running away from you, making it a game, like a chase me type of game, if you can get them to get close to you and then ask them to do a behavior like sit, most of the time that will click their brain back in and they'll be like, okay, I can be a good dog now. So where people go wrong with dogs that are kind of acting wild and jumping or playing chase me is that they feed into it. So again, with the energy, you're encouraging the dog to be high energy and not focused. When if you flip it in yourself, where you insist on that calm behavior, you be calm yourself, you can avoid a lot of those problems and fix them too.
We have some questions coming in on Facebook. One is, we have a dog we adopted, a Chihuahua, about 6 months ago, who is roughly 5 years old and has been adapting great. However, now that we've been home a lot, he's getting protective of us and being nippy, jumpy around strangers, new behavior. What should we do for him?
That's a great question, and also a really common one, especially with dogs that are adopted older. I think that they tend to bond a little bit differently. I don't want to attribute human emotions to dogs necessarily. I do think though that they do feel a little more grateful and things like that. but that doesn't mean that that behavior is okay or appropriate. So what I would do is, if you know you're having somebody come over, have the dog on leash, have a lot of treats ready in your pocket, and just like we were just talking about with the energy, insist on that calm focus. And the entire time people are coming in the house, sitting down, moving around and leaving. So you're going to have to put in a little bit of work and be a little bit more focused on your dog than your guests for a while, but that doesn't mean it will have to be that way forever. What you want to do is, keep the dog on a leash so that you can control those interactions. So you could stop the dog, for example, if they run and try to nip a heel or something like that. Ideally, we wouldn't have to deal with that at all. And then you're going to also give treats to your guests, but you're not going to have them feed from their hand at first. What you're going to do is have them toss treats at the dog. This does two things. First, it's less scary because especially with a Chihuahua, you're not looming over a little dog, which is very intimidating. And also, by tossing a treat, you're giving the dog a little bit of an outlet for their nervousness. So they get to kind of run, move their feet, chase after something, and then they get a resolution from getting the treat. So that's a great thing to do when you first come in the door. And actually, for the earlier question about dogs that are overly excited, doing a treat toss then would be good too. So when your guests come in, dog on leash, toss a couple treats and let the dog chase after them. Try to keep everybody calm. I know like a lot of times when people come to the house, you're excited to see them. So your voice is happy, excited. Just try to be like as chill and neutral as possible when you're working on this. Once everybody's inside, you still have the dog on a leash. Then you'll have everybody kind of sit down, be neutral, be chill, and then just kind of have people toss treats as you walk by with the dog. If the dog is nice and calm, that's great. Then the handler of the dog can sit down too and just kind of work on a little bit of focus. Maybe ask the dog for some eye contact, simple tricks and things like that would be good. Just stuff to occupy their brain so that they're not focusing on how nervous they are or how scary the people are. And then eventually, depending on how things go, if the dog is nice and calm, then you can remove the leash and hopefully things will be fine. One thing I would watch out for, especially with little like lap dog sized dogs, is dogs that resource guard people. So what that is, if you have the dog in your lap, somebody else comes up, the dog snaps at them. That is one of the hard no behaviors for me. If that happens, the dog instantly gets taken off my lap. Those privileges have been removed, and they need to earn the right to have it back. The way that they would earn the right to come back on your lap is by offering calm behavior at your feet. So basically, for issues like this, it's just being consistent, actually training it when people come over, which is really hard. It's hard for me too. And just kind of putting in the time to get your dog to understand what is expected of them. All right, that's pretty good.
Great answer. Yeah, thank you. That's huge. Hopefully, I think about that. My dog kind of gets really excited because I get super excited when somebody shows up, especially now. The first time somebody shows up at the house after all this, I'm gonna need a treat. Yeah. What? Go ahead, Brian. Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, sorry. Another person asked, how do you deal with a dog who has separation anxiety? I think a lot of dogs do. So, right now we're all home, but what a stark contrast that will be pretty soon, huh?
Yeah.
For sure. So separation anxiety is a really common issue too. The best thing that I have found for that is crate training. If you've never used a crate, definitely I would recommend starting. If you've never ever crate trained a dog in your life, I would recommend, there's a trainer named Susan Garrett, and she does a DVD, maybe a book too, but I have the DVD called Crate Games. And what it does is it introduces the dog to the crate in a way that makes it kind of their idea. So a traditional crate training is kind of you shove the dog in there and let them scream it out until they stop. I don't like doing that so much. because I want the dog to view the crate as a safe place to be. So for separation anxiety, the reason a crate works great for that, if you introduce it to them properly, is that they have a safe place to go where you conditioned it to be a calm, safe, comfortable place that they can go. So they don't have to pace the house worried, because you kind of take away that option. I like to put like a fun bone or a Kong toy stuffed with something yummy in there to kind of work out a little bit of those anxieties, and then just kind of help them feel safe in that environment. So the dogs that have a lot of separation anxiety usually have anxiety in other areas of their life. So like we've been talking all along about energy and being consistent, like all of that type of work will be very beneficial for separation anxiety, because not only will your dog be conditioned to respond to things calmly, but they will also kind of trust you because you've worked that trust. And so if they trust you to come back. So crate training, other work. You could also do like a little training session before to get their brain a little bit tired. And then if you have a dog that's really anxious, right now, if you're home, is a great time to work on that. Work on those, because you can do little short bursts. It's not like you're gone for 4 hours or 8 hours. You can work on, being calm and comfortable in the crate for 10 minutes, in little 10-minute bursts as opposed to those long periods of time. But there are a lot of resources for crate training, separation anxiety online. I can link to some of those later, some of my favorites. But yeah.
That would be helpful. And I hear you talk a lot about treats. What are some of your favorite treats to use with your dogs, and what like size,
Oh, that's a great question. So I like a soft or a semi-soft treat that's small or small enough that I can break it up. So I have a few examples. So some Scooby snacks that got a bark box. These are kind of nice. It's about 1 inch square. I would not use this whole treat at once. So I would actually break this up into, like, I could break this into 6 or 8 pieces. Cass. He thinks I threw it on the ground. Yeah, you want something that's about that size. One of my favorite things to do for treats is I take a hot dog or a piece of string cheese. I cut it into quarters and then dice it. So those little treats are like the perfect size. If it's a hot dog, they can get kind of gross. I'm not a hot dog person, but what my favorite thing to do with a chopped up hot dog, you put it on a paper towel and microwave it for a couple minutes, and it actually sucks all the grease out. So you have like these little, like almost bacony, small little treats. So those are a great one. Like if you need something that has a little more power than string cheese, but it's still like inexpensive and easy to get. Here's some more Scooby snacks, but these ones are a little bit smaller. Obviously, Cass is very interested.
He knows what's
yeah. So these are little. I like little ones that I can break up that aren't crumbly. So I don't like the hard biscuits because like you get crumbs everywhere, and then the dog wants to spend 10 minutes like vacuuming up all the crumbs. Yeah. So I like something small that they can do in one bite. They don't have to spend 5 minutes chewing on it, getting it down. Right, sure. Buddy? Yeah, he'll take anything. Other thing that's really good to use, especially if you have a dog that is a picky eater or doesn't want to chew treats, or if you have an old dog that doesn't have teeth, they sell like these little like squeeze tube things, like for it's like travel shampoo. You can stuff that full of almond butter or liverwurst or some gross like pasty peanut butter, and then just like the dog licks the tube basically. And they also sell ones that are actually made for pets, like licky sticks or something like that. It looks like a little container of Icy Hot with a rolly ball, and just like gets a little bit of treat. Yeah. Those are really good. Like I said, if you have a dog that doesn't like to chew on treats or can't. Sure. Basically, for treats, what I like is something that's easy and small. It doesn't take the dog a lot of time to do. and that they like. So, and that really is different for each dog. Some dogs require what are called higher value treats. So I have treats on a scale. Like a low value treat would be, say, kibble, and a high value treat would be steak. And there's like a spectrum of treats in between, ranging from low to high based on what your dog is kind of neutral about to what they go crazy for. And depending on what you're training, you'll need to choose a treat that is appropriate for that. So let's say pretend he was reactive to other dogs, and we were working around other dogs, trying to rehab him, get him, kind of comfortable with that. I wouldn't want to use kibble for that, right? I want to use something higher value. So I would bring out the steak. And so if he makes the right choices in those really difficult, exercises that we're doing, then he gets. So a lot of times if people are having trouble with their dogs, like not paying attention to the treat that they have in their hand, that's pretty common. The most common reason for that is that the dog finds whatever treat they have to be too low value. So if that, just because your dog doesn't like one treat doesn't mean they don't like any treats. So I would encourage you all to experiment and see what they might like.
Sure. Cindy asked, she has a 2.5-year-old 6-pound Chihuahua, and the dog doesn't want to eat without her close, but it's not scared. The dog isn't scared because she will take stuff away from the 100-pound English bull. So she's trying to figure out like what to do with that.
Well, that's an interesting one. So my first response really for dogs that don't want to eat and there's no medical reason for that is that dogs will eat eventually. So they're not going to starve themselves. And this is more of a common issue, like if you only have one dog, so they don't have any competition, but that's not really the case here. So there's two ways you could go with this, honestly. The first would be you put the food bowl down. If she doesn't eat it, food bowl goes up, then you try again later. The second option would be sit. The second option would be just slowly fading herself out of the picture. So how that would look, you would start, standing right next to the bowl or whatever, gradually over a few training sessions, start moving further and further away until it's no longer an issue. And that would be what I would try. One of those two.
Yeah. I know you have some tips for us. I have one more question in here, and I think it kind of relates to something I would ask as well. I'm thinking digging and carpet eating may be about the same category with training. So my dog digs. Trevor Owen and Shanette's dog seems to like to eat carpet now. So what can we do for these pups?
Okay, so digging, carpet eating, all of those types of destructive behaviors are usually because of boredom, anxiety, or both. So it's basically the dog doesn't know what to do with themselves, so they find something to do. I always say in my classes, if you don't give your dog a job, they'll find one for themselves, and it's not usually one that you want them to have. So for my dogs, it's squirrels. My dogs don't. Now that I've said this, I'm going to regret it. My dogs don't tend to be destructive, but I do have some diggers, and really for digging, like any types of like that kind of behavior, it's more of a management and a redirection issue than it is like stopping digging. Like you can't punish a dog out of digging. You can't punish a dog on the carpet. It just doesn't work. Like you can't, like if you yell at them, it means nothing because they still did it and it was still fun. And they'll do it next time.
YOLO.
So,
yeah.
I think that a lot more people are probably having these problems now because their dogs are kind of bored, just like we are. Maybe they're getting more unstructured time because of how the world is right now. So it's a management thing first. So what that means is don't leave your dog unattended for long periods of time to allow them to do that. And the second would be to redirect them into something more productive, I guess. A great way to do that kind of occupy their brains, let them work out a little bit of frustration, a little bit of prey drive, things like that, are with puzzle toys. So if you've never heard of a puzzle toy, they have a ton of them for sale online. There's some you can make yourself. I'll show you a couple in a minute. But basically what they are creative ways for your dog to find food. So that taps into their prey drive, their hunt drive, keeps their bodies and their brains active, and it's just fun for them. So I have one right here. This is a muffin tin with a bunch of balls in it. What you would do for this puzzle toy, Cass is really interested. you would put a little, either put their breakfast, divide their breakfast into each one of these muffin tin holes, or treats, or whatever you want, just something in each hole, and the dog has to like hunt out each thing. You could even not put it in every hole so that they have to find which ones it's in. That's a really fun one. You could take, depending on how excited your dog is, it could take them a while, it could take them 2 seconds. If you have a really smart dog, they'll just dump it over and they get all the treats instantly. But yeah, that's one that I really like. Here's another one. This is a Kong. It's very well loved. I'm sorry. It looks like Saturn, but you can see in this hole right here, you put, like, this will fit like a whole cup of food. So sometimes I'll give these to my dogs for breakfast, and just, it takes them 15-20 minutes. They roll it, and as they roll it, the food comes out. That's a really good one. And then I swear, if I give the Kong one to my dogs, like they all take a nap after breakfast. They're like so tired.
That's good.
Yeah, they have bowls that kind of look like a maze that you pour the food in. They have to kind of like hunt through the bowl. Another easy way, to do that. And if you have a dog that likes being outside, just a cookie toss outside. So you basically, so if you have one dog, you can toss their kibble just in an area of the yard. If you have multiple dogs, I would toss each dog's kibble in a different area so they're not like competing for resources. But they can hunt for the food in the grass, and it's like really fun for them. So a lot of things like that will take the edge off, I think, for dogs that are bored and anxious and like looking for something to do. Puzzle toys, like there's all sorts of them. If you go on Amazon, there's like a billion. But yeah, I like the muffin tin. I really like the Saturn one. I like ones that the dog actually has to move to get food out of, because I think it's just more fun for them, and it's fun to watch too. Let's be real.
Right.
And another thing would be outside of managing, outside of redirecting, is doing a little bit more mental work with your dog every day. So a short training session, 5 minutes, just running them through the skills that they know, maybe teaching them something different, and just engaging their brain in a way that something like a walk wouldn't. Walks are kind of a more neutral type of a thing where the dog can kind of check out, sniff, pee on stuff. A training session taps into a different part of their brain that I think helps them be more settled around the house.
That's good. And kind of talking about energy, I know Brian and Tammy have used you a little bit for agility. Brian, Tammy, Ellie, y'all want to talk a little bit about that and what is agility for dogs,
Sure.
We loved agility. Do you want to just talk about that, Ellie? I mean, it went over really well. It was a blast, and really works their exercise, but also cognitive. And I mean, Theo would now he's so mellow, it's crazy. But when he was a puppy, he was not. And I mean, he'd be sleeping for a couple hours afterwards. It was great. Yeah.
So agility is basically a dog obstacle course game. So the dog performs a course of obstacles, jumps, contact obstacles like the A-frame and the dog walk and the teeter-totter, tunnels, all sorts of things like that. The course is always different depending on, like, if you're competing, depending on the day and the judge in the class, but the obstacles are the same. So the thing I love about agility is that it teaches dogs to interact with the world in a different way. So they're not just following commands, they actually learn how to make decisions and how to work as a team with you. So I think that a lot of the lessons of agility translate really well to every aspect of your dog's life. It's really fun. It's really active. If you have a dog that's high energy, needs an outlet, agility is great. Of course, I always suggest an obedience foundation first, because a lot of the stuff that we do, it does require some obedience skills. So I wouldn't just take like a dog off the street into an agility class and expect them to be successful. But it's a really great option for dogs that just kind of need a little bit more than sitting around the house all day. So for your digger or your carpet chewer, agility might be a fun thing for them to try. And I know there are a couple places around town that do offer agility classes, and I teach them myself. Obviously not right now with how things are going, but yeah, agility is really fun. I've competed at high levels of agility. I've done, I've had a lot of fun with my dogs doing it. And one of my favorite parts about teaching is kind of sharing that fun with other people.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and we know for sure, because we've seen how shelters some of them have all their dogs have been adopted and things like that. Do you have any kind of tips for people that have adopted dogs during quarantine, both puppies and older? Just kind of what would be your go-to 3 or 5 things that you would say, do this, practice this while you can when you first bring a new dog?
Sure. That's a great question. I have a few things that I focus on whenever I get a new dog that I think are beneficial for all dogs. The first thing that I want to establish with any new dog is their relationship with me. So that is more important than socialization, taking them places, doing anything like that. I want to start training them from the get-go, start working on those focus behaviors, eye contact, tricks, things like that, to really build value in paying attention to me. So that's the first thing I work on. Second thing is a solid recall. So a recall is coming when called. And that is my number one most important life skill for all dogs, because it is literally life or death. Sometimes if you call your dog, there's a car coming, they really want to chase the cat across the road. If they make the wrong choice, that doesn't end well for them. So I do a lot of work on establishing a solid recall for my dogs from the very beginning. And really, it's the main thing I focus on with all of my puppies, right from the start. So every day we're working on it. And I always make it very rewarding for them to come to me. So what that means, I always have treats. I always reward them. If I don't have treats, I really really make it exciting. That kind of thing. The third thing would probably be a crate training, because it does have so many benefits outside of just having a place to stash your dog. I think it, like I said earlier, it becomes kind of a safe haven, a safe place for them. It becomes a way to battle separation anxiety, things like that. And it just, like, my dogs all, oh, what he's looking at. My dogs all love their crates, and it's something that I use on a daily basis. And it's something that I want my dogs to be comfortable with, not just because it's easy for me, but, for things like going to the vet or going to the groomer, they will have to be contained. Mm-hmm. So teaching them to be comfortable with that, teaching them that it's not scary, that has a lot of life benefits.
Awesome.
One of the things that we really learned from Ellie was expectation of your dog. And I've had dogs all my life. Theo's my 5th boxer, and I've done with all the boxers, we did dog training, but I never really thought about what am I expecting of my dog, and they're not going to rise beyond the level of your expectation, probably. And so, if I just want a dog to just, lay there, but I think you value your relationship with your dog so much more when you really work on developing, especially like agility. That was very bonding for us. And but yeah, I think I kind of feel bad for some of my previous dogs, because I don't think I expected near as much as I should have with them. I loved them all, but yeah. You want to talk about that a little bit, Ellie?
Sure. I mean, I think I said in the way beginning, dogs are really like perfect creatures, and they are without, outwardly motivation that, is, they don't approach the world like we do. All they want to do is know what we expect of them, and they will try their hardest to do that. The biggest problem I think a lot of people have is that they're really unclear in their expectations of their dog in communicating that to their dog. So the dog doesn't understand how to be right. And that creates a lot of frustration, both for the dog and for the owner, because, the dog's not doing what they want, and the dog has no clue what's expected of them. And there's just like a big gap in communication. So the main thing that I focus on, like I was talking about just a minute ago with my puppies, establishing that relationship with me. If I establish that, it opens up that line of communication so that me and my dog can talk to each other. I think it's remarkable all the things that dogs do for us. They really work very hard constantly to communicate with us, to try to tell us things. And we're not always so good at listening, is the problem. But, through training, through, trick training, or just working with your dog every day, interacting with them, learning to read their body language, taking a vested interest in learning dog body language, which more people should do. You can really make it so that your expectations are matched, I guess, between you and your dog. So your dog understands what you want, you understand what you want, and you are communicating that as effectively as you can to your dog.
Yeah. If you were looking for a trainer, what are some of the things you would look for in a trainer, or what tips should we be looking for if we were looking for somebody to help us with our dogs?
That's a great question. The first thing that I would look for is experience. I know that sounds very basic, but I would be looking for a trainer that has experience in the things that you want. So if you're looking to work on a behavior issue, I would look for a trainer that's experienced in behavior. If you're looking for agility, I'd look for somebody who's successful in agility, not just somebody who has agility equipment at their house, for example. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of people teaching things because, there's no official certification that makes you a professional dog trainer. Like anybody can go out and say that they're a professional. So it's kind of on the consumer to weed through people to find somebody who is both qualified to work with you and that is knowledgeable in the areas that you want. I tend to steer people to avoid trainers that do a lot of harsh punishments, mostly because, for one, I think there are a lot of better ways to communicate with your dog, but also a lot of people they lack the finesse to use those tools appropriately. And I think that there are better ways to accomplish the same goals. Luckily, we have a lot of great positive, mostly positive trainers in town to work with. And so that's the direction that I would steer you that way, no matter what the activity is that you're looking for or the behavior issue. The last thing I would look for is just somebody whose words make sense to you. Not everybody learns the same. Not everybody communicates the same. And I know that certain people resonate better with others, So just kind of, I would encourage you to talk to more than one trainer if possible, and just kind of see who you jive with. Maybe sign up for like a private lesson with more than one and just kind of see who kind of speaks to you the most. That would be best advice there, I think.
Well, thanks, Ellie. Yeah. I think you trained me a little bit this hour. Hopefully I can take that to my dog. And, we have a dog loving community for sure at Hillspring. So I'm sure that you've spoken to a lot of us. Hopefully we can get our dogs to quit eating carpet, it's a long shot, but we're quarantined, so anything can happen.
Sure.
Yeah. And so thank you again for your time today and for teaching us. And next week, that Town Talk is going to be on summer fun on a budget. We're going to be trying to find some things to tell y'all that would be fun to do while social distancing and be able to enjoy your summer. And that'll be next week at 6:30 here on Facebook and YouTube. So thanks again, everybody. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Ellie and Cass. I hope y'all have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Ellie.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie.
Bye.
Thank you.